if I can influence and find other people that have common beliefs and set solid beliefs about our vision, our mission, our purpose, our values, and then in turn influence behavior, the results take care of themselves.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Surveys have shown that nearly half of workers hate their job.
Yeah.
CEOs have built companies they don't enjoy showing up to. I think it was in 2019, Lifeway Research said that 4,500 churches shut down. It's a culture problem. Culture is the strong foundation that helps you kind of weather the trends. Because if you don't have a strong culture and foundation, you're always chasing trends. I like to say that culture is taught, not bought. So a lot of times we're like, okay, well, we need to be cooler. We need to be hip in our churches. We need the lights, and then we need this. And all those things are great. Yeah. But if you don't have a strong foundation, if you don't have a strong culture, people will recognize it for what it is. Yeah.
Welcome to Last in Line podcast, where we are highlighting, showcasing, and spotlighting great leaders of faith who have overcome adversity, cultivated resilience, and served others in a significant capacity. So settle in and be encouraged by this episode of Last in Line podcast. I want to thank Alex Sezer today for joining Last in Line podcast. Alex is a former Texas A&M football player and captain, where he won many awards for outstanding athletics and academics. He started his own company at 22 in real estate, where he was acquiring properties, managing people, and refining his leadership skills. He managed 350 units, purchased 350 units and $75 million in assets. Twin City Properties was his company, and he most recently has started a culture coaching company. And we're going to get to hear about Alex's definition of culture, why it's important, how he implements ways to refine, cultivate, and establish culture within businesses. He's a man of faith. He talks about where he gets some of his principles for his coaching model from right out of the Bible, where it all began: discipleship, coaching, leadership, servant leadership. So Alex is a blessing today on our podcast, and we get to hear about his vision for the future, how he plans to scale and grow this organization, how you can reach out to Alex if you have an organization that is looking for some culture revamping and igniting the culture within your organization. So Alex Sezer, welcome him to Last in Line podcast. Alex Sezer, good to see you again. Welcome back to Last in Line podcast.
Yes, sir. Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Hey, man, it's an honor always to have people who are good leaders, who are followers of Christ and bold in their faith, and guys who have just are out there doing it and been really successful in pretty much every area you've ever been involved in. But before we start the meat and potatoes of the conversation, I told you offline I was going to come at you with something that I didn't plan on, and you said, hey, bring it on. So here we go.
I'm always ready for a challenge. Let's do it.
Hey, man, before we start this, I just want my listeners to know, because maybe some of them don't know you, because people are all over the country listening in different parts. Why would somebody want to keep this on and listen to this interview? Why would somebody want to stick with this conversation? What are they going to get out? What's a game changer takeaway for somebody today?
Nice. I love the question. First off, let's start there.
Let's go.
But the reason why you want to stay and listen to this podcast, number one, there's an amazing host who's about to ask amazing questions. But number two is, I think you will see the Bible in a different light and as a different tool. I think you'll walk away and say, man, how did I never see that there? And then you'll also see how the Bible can be utilized in your life and in your business to radically change the results that you experience. That's why you should listen.
Okay, so for the listeners, that was not planned. That was not scripted, even though his answer sounded like he gave that like a week's worth of thought. That was right off the top of the dome,
No
listeners.
clue.
So that's
Yep.
what you're in for, people. We got Alex Sezer here, and you're in for a treat. So before we get into everything, man, talk about your experience, because you grew up in Texas. You played football at Texas A&M, which is no joke of a program. So you got to have some skills and some talent. You were captain. You won a bunch of awards there. Pretty much everything you've touched has, I mean, without knowing every aspect of your life, turned to gold, for lack of a better term. So talk about your teenage and college years coming up, and some of the leaders that you looked at as being those gold standards for leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm from a small town in East Texas, Orange, Texas, last town before you cross over into Louisiana. I'm a redeemed man, bought with a price I couldn't pay. I'm Alex Sezer's son, Miranda Sezer's baby, and Deja's husband. And then, some people know me as an entrepreneur and obviously as an ex-athlete at Texas A&M University. But yeah, it was an interesting journey. In hindsight, it looks like, man, that was well planned and everything worked according to plan. I had a plan to be a Division I football player, but that plan did not go according to plan. I was going into my senior season in high school with 0 football scholarship offers. Now, I don't know if you know anything about recruiting, but that is bad news.
It is. It is.
So it was the last year that Texas A&M could have traveling camps, or anyone could, I guess, in the SEC. And they actually had a camp at my school. Now, my school has not put out before me a Division I athlete in decades, ages. So there was really no reason for them to come to my school except of the proximity to Louisiana. So they could get Texas kids and Louisiana kids. I showed up to the camp, 5'9", 167 pounds, soaking wet, and thought I was going to be a SEC running back. And long story short, we began the test at the camp, and I ran a 40-yard dash, and I could kind of see heads start to turn and coaches start to talk. And Coach Sumlin walks up to me and he says, "Hey, son, can you do that again?" I said, "Absolutely." So at this point, I go back to the starting line and I look up, and every single coach on the Texas A&M staff is now timing me. I guess they thought that Coach McKinney's hand wasn't good enough or something like that, but they're all timing me, and I run the 40-yard dash again. From there, the legend started. I ran a 4-flat 40-yard dash in knee-high grass, but they ended up offering me a scholarship without ever seeing me play football at a position that I'd never played before. So that day I went with the defensive backs. I played running back my whole life, and had a pretty solid camp, and they ended up talking.
Second. Yeah. Hold on a second. I'm going to interrupt you because I didn't miss what you said. I'm just trying to figure out a nice way of saying this. You ran a 4-flat? Like, that doesn't have – you're joking. No. What did you really run?
That's the joke, because the narrative on TexAgs and all of the message boards were like, where did this kid come from? The grass was really, really high.
Was it? Okay.
So the joke is I ran a 4-flat.
Though?
That day I was running 4.3s on grass, 4.4, low 4.4.
That's ridiculous. Okay, that's fast. If you don't know listening, that's fast. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry,
so
you went with the DB.
Grass and potholes. So I think the next, to give you some perspective, the closest time to my time that day was probably 0.3 seconds off. And there were guys that are in the league right now that were at that camp.
So they saw a defensive back when they looked at you, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. They saw a small guy who could run. Okay. I don't think they knew exactly what position I would play once I got to campus. Okay. They just knew that I played running back in the past. They could probably find some film if they really wanted to. I had a lot of injuries in high school, so I probably only played a combined 1 full season throughout my 3 years on varsity. Okay. But yeah, they sent me with defensive backs, had a solid camp. And the last play of the camp, they lined me up against a guy who's actually in the league right now. I think he's still playing, and interception, took it back for 6, shut the camp down, and they never stopped calling since then. So,
gee whiz, wow. Well,
ended up starting as a true freshman. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, at Texas A&M, like that's not nothing. And for you to not have any, for those that don't know, if you finish your junior season without any offers or visits, that's a bad sign. So
no offers, no stars.
Yeah. So, I mean, God had a plan for you to go to College Station, Texas, and you thrived there. Obviously, you won some pretty distinguished honors there, in addition to just being one of the team captains. Who were some of the coaches or adults, maybe mentors coming up that, I guess not necessarily who are they, but tell me what about those people was so magnetic and why you gravitated toward their leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd start with my grandfather. Give a little perspective. My dad's a pastor. My grandfather was a pastor, his dad. So it started off with the grandfather kind of being the pillar of the family. And a weird thing about my family is that most people that come from that side of my family all of our names start with an A. And my grandpa was very intentional about that. And he explained it to all of us. You're going to be first and not last. You're going to give your best at everything you do. My grandpa literally used to tell me, if you're going to rob banks, you better be the best bank robber. Now, he wasn't encouraging me to rob a bank, but what he was saying is whatever your hand finds to do it with all of your might. So I saw my grandfather, who was not college educated, start a couple of businesses, obviously in the Jim Crow South, and just battled through adversity. He went on to start a concrete business and a real estate business, and obviously had the church. And then to see that pass down, that work ethic to my dad, who had football scholarships and then had me at 17 years old and chose to forego that and stay and take care of me. And he joined the military and then came back home afterwards. My parents have been together for 29 years and they're in their 40s. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Talk
that's
about,
awesome.
An example there, but I saw him growing up and the way that he worked and how he just gave his all and everything. And I mean, he started waking me up at 5 o'clock in the morning in junior high. So I've been training at 5 o'clock ever since I was, 13, 12 years old. So just to see those two guys in my life and then to be introduced to a guy by the name of Nathan Byerly as a little league football coach who literally almost made me quit football. I mean, I'd never trained that hard in my life. And he still talk to him until this day. And he just pulled greatness out of me and kept pushing me. And he saw something in me. And I was a little, chubby kid out of shape. And Coach Nat, that's what we called him. He'd always say, Coach Nat loves you. And he worked me hard. So those three guys, and then obviously my mom was an example, but down from my grandfather, those were pillars in my life.
That's good. No, it's good, man. I know you got a history of faith. You basically, from the womb, I would imagine you knew who Jesus was. You knew what your faith was going to look like based on how it was modeled for you. And that's an ideal situation. Not everybody has that, of course. And there's, rags to riches from a spiritual standpoint. A lot of times, me being one of those, but I don't really have a flashy testimony. And as far as just this old, crazy transformational, radical lightning bolt moment, but I did, I've experienced both lifestyles, and it sounds like you kind of had good modeling the whole way. Not saying that you were perfect at all, but in college, man, maybe real quick before we transition into the business side of you, when you were in college, did you find that it was, I know you did, so this is a dumb question, but how did you battle or navigate through the challenges of high level, high profile Division I football program and walking the straight and narrow in your faith? How did you manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I always tell, I talk to the incoming freshmen at A&M every year, and what I always tell those guys is this: if you don't know who you are when you get here, they will tell you. So it's kind of like I had a solid foundation, and that's where I always had to go back to. So you're going to have times in college, in life, that you can compromise those things. So you have to make a decision, a choice to say, am I going to stay true to my foundation, my identity, who I am, or am I going to compromise? And that started like before I even got on campus. I mean, I have stories that would embarrass some people, so I'll leave them out. But
yeah,
there were times that I literally had to, I've been in some compromising situations to where things could have went one way and I had to make a decision like, or am I going to remain faithful?
Right.
Or am I going to compromise those things? So the biggest thing for me, and this is, it's helped me tremendously in life. It helped me in football. it helped me before football, is this: do not tie your identity to what you are doing. If you look at Jesus in the desert and the temptation that he faced, he leaves the Jordan River dripping wet from baptism, and the enemy comes to him and says, after the sky is parted, the Father looks down and says, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." Boom, immediately goes into the desert. The enemy says, if you are the Son of God, then command that these stones become bread. So what does that mean? If you are, then you do. So it's a temptation that I am what I do. And many athletes face that temptation that I don't know who I am outside of what I'm doing. Many business people face that temptation that I don't know who I am outside of what I'm doing. So that was my rock. That was what I could always rely on, is I am a redeemed man purchased by the blood of Christ. And everything else in my life can change, but that's constant. Yeah. Everything around me can change, but that's constant.
I mean, 100%. And I will say too, what you said was important, and people that are listening to this have to know that those were standards you set before you were ever put in the situation of good and evil, or
absolutely
sin and righteousness. Like, you made a decision ahead of time, knowing you were going to be faced with some things, but you already had some non-negotiables decided beforehand. And that's, to me, that's what I think discipline is versus motivation. Discipline's already decided. Motivation has to make a decision based on things around them. But you were already grounded, like you said, in who you were in Christ, who your family labeled you as, your identity. So then when you got in these situations where the water got hot, you already knew how to navigate, how to kind of stick and move and bounce, off of some of that stuff, which is huge. Because people, I mean, I'm the same. I used to be this way, but you would kind of be one of those, you could be swayed by the wind, whichever way the wind blows, and you get in those situations, and the wind blows in a bad direction, and then you get caught in the current. And I mean, that's for somebody today that maybe, struggling at work. Maybe they go to the office and they feel like they're a different person than when they are, on Sunday morning, and they're battling there. They're straddling the fence. I just say, look, remember that feeling on Sunday morning you have. Remember that faith you have in a person who died for you so that you could have eternity in heaven. Like, remember that. Yeah. And then when you go, then nothing wavers you. Like, you're standing on a firm foundation. And so, man, that's gold, what you just said. So anything to add to that?
Yeah, two things. I'll say it's all the transition for me, kind of the evolution of my relationship with Christ in college in relation to people on the team. It was so beautiful to watch it evolve. And here's what I mean. When you first come in, there's all of these tests and temptation, even amongst the guys. They're trying you to see if you are who you say you are. If you remain faithful and you prove that, and you stand on that foundation, those guys turned into basically my protectors. It was like, hey, if C's has a problem, we all have a problem. If we're going out, C's can't come with us. It was just kind of like this thing. I'm like, hold on, like, now they're telling me what to do because I established this is who I am. And then they held me to that standard. They're
looking out for you. Yeah. They may not be necessarily walking that, but they don't want to see you fall to it. So that's a good thing, man. Wow. That's rare. I would think that's really rare, but, okay. So you get out and I don't know what you did from the time you graduated. I don't know if you went right into real estate, but you ended up starting your own business and just doing really well in real estate. Like, what does it say? 75 million in assets under management, 350 units that you were a part of owning at the age of 22. Dude. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that doesn't sound like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, since you grew up around pastors, but I guess you could call them entrepreneurs in a way. But if we think of a traditional entrepreneur, it's not like you had a ton of examples around you, right, to draw from. Were you just born with that? Like, how did you become that where you just sort of knew how to do business? How did that happen?
I think it's a tad bit of nature and a tad bit of nurture, a mixture of both. And what I'll say is my grandfather, he did own real estate, not nearly to the scale that I was involved in it. But there was a seed planted there. Very early on, my parents taught me the value of work and also like creativity. Like I wanted to go to an LSU football camp. So they said, okay, if you're going to go to camp, you're going to pay for it. Okay, how am I going to pay for it? I had to go and, start a lawn care company and things like that. So those inklings were there. In college, it really just kind of exploded as far as like the books that I read and meeting other entrepreneurs and the Aggie network and realizing this is what I want to do. So I'll take you back to kind of where it started as far as real estate goes. I'd already started reading books about real estate, Kiyosaki, all of the Gary Keller, all of the popular books. And while I was still in college, it may have been maybe my junior year or so, I met my eventual business partner. And here's how it happened. Mikado Henson was director of player development. He had a friend who had a birthday party for his daughter. Mikado's daughter went to that party. Mikado noticed the lake. And he asked if Doug Peterson would allow for a few football players and Mikado to come out and fish. So that friend
not Doug Peterson from like NFL Philadelphia Eagles.
Not that Doug Peterson. I thought you were gonna say the tall guy.
Oh no. I don't know him. I know Mikado, but I don't know Doug Peterson.
Doug Peterson's like 6'11". You can't miss him when you walk into the room. He's the biggest and the loudest guy. Gotcha. So it's a joke when people meet him for the first time. I'll say, hey, Doug's going to be here. And they say, okay, well, describe. I said, look, you'll know when he walks into the room. You can't miss him. So we go out to fish at his house, and he wasn't out there, but eventually he walked out of the back door, but we had free range to go and fish. So I'm across the lake in a canoe, and I noticed this guy walk out of this beautiful home. I mean, you wouldn't even know that it was in Bryan College Station if I showed you a picture of it. Beautiful lake, beautiful home. And he walks out of the back door, and I see this guy, and he's like huge. And then I was like, oh, it all makes sense now. This is how he got his money. Like, he's a retired NBA player. That's what I thought. Well, he did play basketball for A&M, but he did not go to the NBA. So I paddle across the lake and just get out of the boat just to say thank you. And I said, hey, it was me and probably 5 other players that night and Mikado. And I walk up to Doug and I said, hey, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to come and fish in your backyard. That led to a conversation about real estate. We talk real estate. It's kind of like how God prepared me to be in that place at that time. I had already read books that he had read. So we had an intelligent conversation that night, and he gave me his phone number and told me if I ever need anything, just give him a shout. How many times have you heard that? I didn't do anything with the number for about 2 weeks, and I was really, really interested in real estate. So I decided to reach out to him a few weeks later. I said, hey, this is Alex Sezer. We met, and he remembered me, fired back a text message right away, and that's how our relationship started. So what would happen is he would give me books. I would read the books, give them back to him, talk about the books. And this happened all throughout the remainder of my time in college.
Wow.
So we would go to the movies on Friday night as a team before the games. I would go to the popcorn room and read books. So that started. And then eventually I took a job at a company by the name of Opportune, a bunch of Aggies there, David Baggett, Matt Flanagan was there at the time. So those guys took me in. I was doing some oil and gas energy consulting. And I was at a power plant in Rhode Island, and Doug calls me and says, hey, and the generators are running. And yes, sir. And he says, do you still want to start a real estate business? I said, absolutely. And he offered for me to come back and essentially kind of take over for him. And long story short, I called my girlfriend, eventually fiance, now wife, and told her I was moving back to Bryan College Station. So she never actually got to leave Bryan College Station. So she graduated and we stayed here. And then I went into the company as a manager, moved up. Eventually, he asked me to become the president of the company. I told him no, because I didn't want to kind of be the administrative type of person. And we negotiated back and forth. And I walked into his office one day and said, what does the president of the company do? And he said, whatever you want to do. I said, I'll take it.
So that's a pretty broad brush there. Whatever you want to do. Okay.
So I began to grow the business and started a business inside of, so we had the asset management company, the property management company. I started a holdings company with Doug as my partner and began to buy real estate, looked up a few years, and we had purchased 340 units at property all over Bryan College Station, bought a storage facility in Caldwell. I bought 20 houses in Orange, Texas, 3 hours away. That was an ordeal. Try managing property from 3 hours away.
Wow. Wow.
I bought a vacant nursing home. I bought a property someone had been deceased in for 10 months. Like, I mean, you name it, crack houses. I experienced it all in a short amount of time in real estate. But it was a fun journey, a great experience. And then I can keep going.
Yeah, well, I don't want
to go too far, but I can tell you about the transition. But let's talk real estate. So.
No, that's good. And brother, I can tell you right now, it's above my pay grade to talk about real estate. So you're going to be bored to death talking to me about it.
We're all involved in real estate. Some people send rent checks. Some people send mortgage checks.
That's true.
Some people collect them. Everyone's in real estate. So
that's right. Well, okay. So you have been doing this a while. You've been really successful, but you reached out to me recently, and we hadn't talked probably in over a year. And you reached out to me and said you were starting to do something different a little bit, and you were kind of starting your another company, I guess, and involved in being a culture catalyst is what you called it, I think. Now, first of all, I need to know from your side, or in your opinion, what does a healthy culture look like in a team or in an organization? Like, give me like a couple of pillars that are unwavering, that'll never change and will always be important.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you a little about the transition. I'll get into that. So the way the transition happened, because some people would look at this and go, real estate to culture, but culture is a part of everything, every organization that we're involved in. So while I was building a real estate business, most people look at that as buying property, but something else was happening. I was managing 20 employees, hundreds of vendors, thousands of residents. There's a culture around that. Mm-hmm. And the reason why culture is so important is because the cultures that we form lead to the results that we experience. So what does a healthy culture look like? Number one, we have to define what culture is. So I want to, so that everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. So the way that I view culture, two separate ways, but they both combine. So I define it as a set of beliefs that influences behaviors that leads to results. So some people say, the shared experiences and things like that. But if you think about those three words, beliefs, behaviors, and results, if I can influence and find other people that have common beliefs and set solid beliefs about our vision, our mission, our purpose, our values, and then in turn influence behavior, the results take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So what does that look like in a healthy form or fashion? The second thing kind of answers this on the way I define culture. Culture is a God-given responsibility to steward what we've been put in charge of. So that was the boom. That was the light bulb for me, is when I realized that culture wasn't just a good thing. It was a God thing. Mm-hmm. So as I was a young president trying to figure this out, what's our vision? What's the mission? Like, what do we value most? I turned to the Bible, which is my source of comfort, which is my source of inspiration. And I was thinking, man, if this book, if this source of life, if this truth is so influential in other areas of my life, why can't it be the same way in business? Mm-hmm. So when I looked at how we write a vision statement, I turned to the Bible and realized, like, oh, wow, there's some truth in there about what that's supposed to look like. Yeah. So a healthy culture is us as believers modeling stewardship within the organization, properly caring for the things that we've been placed in charge of, whether that's our people, our resources, our time, our talents. Yeah. How do we properly steward that? The first thing that God did, he puts Adam in the garden. The word cultivate, which is kind of the Latin root of culture, care for it, take care of it.
Yeah.
So it's a stewardship. It's a responsibility. People say, you own 340 units. I was a steward of 340 units. Colossians chapter 3, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. I am a steward of the people that I've been placed in charge of. They don't work for me. I work for them. So that's what a healthy culture looks like, is us properly caring for everything that we've been placed in charge of.
Hey, before we get back to the conversation here with our guest, I want to thank one of our sponsors, a new partner, Uncommon, which is a ministry that is equipping and empowering great men to become the husbands, the fathers, and leaders they were called to be. Go to uncommon.org. That's UNCOMMEN.org. Check out their content. Go to YouVersion, download their devotionals. Great team, great people, great men, and they're out there for you. They're out there with great content, and they're out there to encourage us to be the men we were called to be. So I want to thank TJ and his team at Uncommon. So now let's get back to the conversation with our great guest here at Last in Line Podcast. Yeah, I mean, I like how you kind of weave the two together with culture and stewardship, and they almost could be interchangeable to a degree. Some of the foundational things that make those run. So I kind of broke this out into maybe like three different little, I don't know, three-legged monster here, maybe, and you already said one of them. So to cultivate intentionally, like it's got to be those, that doesn't just happen.
No,
I mean, Adam could have
not.
sat there and twiddled his thumbs and the garden could have looked like an untended garden, right? And uncultivated, it could have looked like garbage. And so it's got to be intentional. So how do you mobilize this concept? So you've got a great model, you've got a template, a vision, right? But you want that to be in other organizations. You want to use this concept and have them, invest in that resource so that you can replicate and this thing can grow legs and run itself. So how do you mobilize that concept of cultivation to somebody that may not always get that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we start with number one, what is culture?
Yeah.
Number two, why does it matter? And number three, how is it created? And that's kind of the how-to piece. So number one, we just define what is culture.
Yeah.
Number two, why does it matter? The culture you form leads to the results that you experience. Yeah. Prime example, 47 million Americans quit their job in 2021 voluntarily. That's a culture problem.
Yeah. And I will tell people, I want to say the percentage attached to that is like 48, 49, like it's almost half. Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. Surveys have shown that nearly half of workers hate their job.
Yeah.
CEOs have built companies they don't enjoy showing up to. I think it was in 2019, Lifeway research said that 4,500 churches shut down. It's a culture problem. So what is it? Why does it matter? We just talked about that. The culture you form leads to the results that you experience. How is it created? Here's where kind of the how-to comes in, the part that I love. So I begin to look at culture and what it was, why it matters, and then how do we actually create this? So I transitioned out of real estate, and the way that happened was essentially God spoke to me on a Saturday. I called my dad. I said, hey, I just bought an RV park. Like I had no plans on leaving. I called my dad and I said, hey, I feel like God's, pushing me into something else. And he says, oh yeah, I already knew that. I said, well, when were you going to tell me? And he said, son, it's not my job to tell you, it's my job to confirm. I knew exactly it's time to go. So I had 30 different modules of biblical entrepreneurship on my board, my whiteboard in the office. And I'm praying over and I look up at the board and just heard the Spirit kind of whisper to me, the first 7 things you have on the board are how culture is created. And I was like, whoa.
That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a big moment.
So I look up at the board and it's vision, purpose, mission, core values, branding, team building, and authenticity. And I got to work on it. I mean, like all of the stuff that I had learned in the past, team captain, president of multiple companies, like I just started pulling from all of that stuff and brought the Bible in as kind of the foundation that I was going to build upon.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of the modules, the building blocks of how culture is formed. Why is that? When you think about vision is an inspirational statement, describing what an organization wants to achieve in the future.
Yeah.
So vision inspires a future outcome, but it also inspires action for today. I'll tell you about the 5 P's of vision. Mission, when you talk about a mission statement, It influences how we operate daily. Talks about why we exist and why that's important and how we're different. Purpose produces perseverance. Talks about why our organization exists, why we're doing this, why we should continue to do this. I can tell you about Jesus's purpose,
That's right.
and why he did what he did, how it produced perseverance in his life. When you think about the team that we form, that's the basis of everything. Dr. Darius Daniel says you don't go as far as your dream, you go as far as your team. So how do you recruit and find the right people? When you think about the values that we are non-negotiables, the things that we kind of view as foundational pillars in an organization that says, hey, we won't compromise this, to therefore influence action. I talk about the 3 Ds of designing values. Values need to be decided, defined, and demonstrated. Values become value statements that become valued actions. We can talk more about that.
Sure.
But all of those things kind of formulate how we operate on a day-to-day basis, and then also what we expect in the future. So that's how culture is created, with all of those different elements being blended together to influence how we behave, what we believe, and the results that we experience.
Yeah. And I think too, when you're talking about that, some of those, I guess, just staples of culture, to the point of the churches that folded a year or two ago, I almost like that culture, if done right on the front end, can withstand the market fluctuations. It can withstand any social, polarization that's out there, any variations of external forces. I believe that is sort of like the story of building the house, right? And building it on sand or on the rock. And so if you're incorporating faith values in there, then it's going to withstand anything that tries to, I guess, shake it, right? It makes it sort of immovable. So that's where you got to start, obviously. And you're right on. That's amazing.
Culture is the strong foundation that helps you kind of weather the trends. Because if you don't have a strong culture and foundation, you're always chasing trends. I like to say that culture is taught, not bought. So a lot of times we're like, okay, well, we need to be cooler. We need to be hip in our churches. We need the lights, and then we need this. And all those things are great. Yeah. But if you don't have a strong foundation, if you don't have a strong culture, people will recognize it for what it is, which is a cool show. Yeah. So it's like, how do we have those foundational pillars of this is who we are, this is what we believe, and this is how that is expressed in our organization. Galatians chapter 5, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. So it's like, it's those things that express themselves in our churches, in our lives. Like, these are our foundational pillars. These are our values. And this is how we expect to see it acted out. All of the other stuff is, it's good. It's a good additive, but it's a poor foundation.
Yeah, and to your point too of some of the fluff that we try to chase, just the root of all that is comparisons. And I think comparisons can be healthy, but they can be toxic. So maybe that was my second of the 3-legged monster I was telling you about, is this compete courageously that I have. So I've got 3, and my audience knows I'm a kind of a alliteration nerd. So I've got cultivate intentionally, I've got compete courageously, and I've got create completely. So compete courageously. So to the point of comparisons, and like you said, like, we're chasing this, we're chasing that, but if our culture's good, we don't need all that. So tell the audience the difference here in maybe a competing, maybe the versus comparisons, because competition, let's face it, anybody that's out there as a revenue stream, or is a for profit, even nonprofits, I would say everything's a competition, right? And it's not unhealthy unless it becomes kind of your driving force and comparison seeps in. So talk about the difference of maybe unhealthy competition, unhealthy comparisons, and the difference.
Absolutely. So if you look at kind of the modules that I outline, the last one is authenticity. And here's what I mean by that. So many companies, so many organizations have what I call copycat culture or counterfeit culture, which means if you think about a counterfeit bill, it looks like the real thing, but it has no value. So I equate this biblically when you look at kind of David and Goliath and the battle that he fought before the big battle that we know about. So as he's going to fight Goliath, the king, Saul, places his armor on David. And here's the part that I love. It says David tried to walk around and tried to use the armor. He tried to honor King Saul's request. But here's the part I love. It says he took it off because he was not used to it. So many times we try to copy someone else's greatness.
Yeah.
So many times we try to copy someone else's culture. But see, if we copy their conclusion without their experiences, that's where we get the counterfeit. Because it's like, why do they believe this? We don't know. We're just going to believe that too. Well, cool. It sounds cool, but now you just have words on a wall that don't have any substance because you copied it from someone else. So that's the temptation in big moments. I remember as an athlete, like the biggest temptation in those big games is to try and be something that you're not. Like, oh, I'm going to wear, extra wristbands this game because it's a big game. No, the same fundamentals that win scrimmages win championships. So it's like, how do we remain true to who we are and not copy what someone else is doing and stay true to who God called us to be? Although David was a kid being pressured by a king, he didn't conform.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing with culture is like, it's so, it looks like it expedites it when you can just go, well, Google's cool. Let's just, throw in a sleeping pod, a foosball table, and call it a day.
Yeah.
But you don't know the backstory about why they have a foosball table. Maybe it was kind of this work hard culture where people slept in the office. Like, is that what you want? So that's the biggest thing is like, do not copy someone else's conclusion without their experience.
Yeah. And that's awesome. That's a great point. And the armor of David, like that's a great analogy. And I will say too, to that point, the devil, to draw a parallel here, the devil loves to counterfeit God's word. Like he makes it almost the same, which is why we believe some of these lies. Like he can shine it up to look similar, but it's not authentic, right? Just like to your point of the $100 bill, like there's people that can make those look almost identical. And you see all the knockoff Louis Vuitton bags that are out there, all the knockoffs. The devil is a master of knockoffs, and he will try to twist. He did it with Jesus and and try to twist God's word. And didn't he say this?
Yeah,
and
you won't surely die.
And so I think that's a great, because similarities don't always mean exact, or don't always mean authenticity. So
you can still learn from someone without copying everything that they do.
For
example, if you have a great speaker or a great presenter, you can take elements from like, okay, I see how he involves the crowd or things like that. But if you go up on that stage and try to sound exactly like someone else, people will recognize it for what it is, a copy. If it's a great football player, you can take the techniques, but if you go out there and try to be Deion Sanders, people will recognize for what you are, a copy.
Yeah.
So
if you're trying to be 6'4" and you're 5'10", you're going to struggle with that.
That was something I realized at A&M was like, whenever I got to A&M, I'm a smaller guy. So obviously there's, these insecurities floating around like, well, maybe I need to put on some weight. And then I realized I'm never going to be as big as the biggest guy.
Yeah.
But I can be fast.
Yeah.
And I can probably be as fast as the fastest guy. So like, why compromise my speed to try and gain weight to be as big as the biggest guy when I'm never going to be that? So it's like, you have to figure out how to hone in and lean on your strengths. What makes you unique? What makes you special? What did God give you? What gift did he give you? And lean into that. Like, I'm not good at golf. I'm probably not going to be good at golf. Like, that's just not my thing. But what did God give me? So that is so important. I think it says in the Bible, it says, comparing ourselves against ourselves, we are unwise. And here's why we're unwise when we do that. We all make poor copies and great originals. So if I compare myself to John's greatness, like, I'm never going to be as great as you are in the areas that you're great in. But I have things that God has given me I have areas that God has gifted me in. So it's like, you really have to be attentive to what God has given you and what he's placed inside of you. I mean, even look at the parable of talents. He gifted them according to their own abilities.
Yeah, he did. And I would go back to, I think, 1 Corinthians, and I'll fail on the chapter. I thought it was 12. It might not be, but talks about the members of the body, right? And the ear doesn't say, I want to be a foot, and vice versa. So I think, so tie that into my last little C here of create completely. So how are we if we're creating teams, because that's one of your 7 is building good teams. And I'm big into that. I'm big into that. Like, I love that. That's kind of my flow and my sweet spot on identifying skill sets and knowing where to place people for success. And like you said, not trying to put a round peg in a square hole type of thing. But how do you create healthy environments? Like, if you're telling an organization, your new coaching, your new consulting company that you're starting, like, you're going in and you're talking to an organization and their team's a wreck.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to start with the foundations of faith first, but let's just say that's all equal. Talk about creating kind of a healthy environment and how teams can do that, and how you can put serving in there as maybe the steering wheel of that team.
Yeah, absolutely. So a big part of a healthy environment is having healthy people. And, because essentially the team that you create is going to create the environment. The old cliche saying, one bad apple spoils the bunch. So that's where I would start is, number one, after we've laid that foundation, what's the vision, the mission, the values, all of those things. Now we have to identify who's in alignment with that.
Yep.
Because that's the biggest thing that can kill a vision in the organization is division, division. That it's literally the meaning, two separate visions. Like we are not in alignment. So when we talk about building healthy teams to create a healthy environment, here's how we do it. Exodus chapter 18, I believe, it's Jethro and Moses, kind of on your bring your dad to work day. So Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, is observing Moses, and he says, son, what you are doing is all wrong. Listen to me and I will give you some advice. So it starts by outlining the problem. You're doing everything. You're not delegating anything. You're going to wear yourself out, and the people are going to be tired also. So then he gives some advice, and here's what I boil it down to kind of go with the alliterations. It's the 3 C's of hiring properly. He said, teach them God's decrees. And then he says this, find capable, God-fearing, and trustworthy men, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. What do I mean by the 3 C's of hiring properly? Number one, you need to find people who are competent. He says, find capable people. Can they do the job with excellence? Number 2, you have to find people with character. He says, God-fearing and trustworthy men. Not all help is created equal. You have to make sure, do they match our core values? Because the worst thing you can do is hire someone who's talented, but not in alignment. Because now you have someone who is influential and influencing people to go in the opposite direction of where the organization is trying to go. And the last thing is capacity. You have to make sure that you are placing people in the right position within the organization. Appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Not everyone that's on your team can handle the same load. So you have to make sure that you put the right people in the right seat. So once you have a healthy foundation that you can build upon, now you bring in those team members and make sure that you are, as a leader, appointing them to the right position. I also have another acronym. It's called RESUME: recruit, educate, select, uplift, model, escort. It's a lot of details in there, but essentially it's talking about finding the right people, appointing them to the right position, and modeling the behavior that you want to see acted out within your organization.
That's
Delegation
awesome.
is not abandonment.
Dang.
He told Moses, still be around for the complex issues.
Yeah.
So just because you go, okay, now I have help, that does not mean that you go, figure it out, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
You still have to be there to support your team.
Well, that's how, but yeah. And for those listening that are maybe kind of raising an eyebrow at the whole delegation thing, because I think people struggle with that. I know leaders who are, quote unquote, self-made, struggle with that a lot, and they just rather do it themselves than have to teach somebody. But, it talks about feeding a man or teaching a man to fish. And obviously I paraphrase that, but that's how you grow. That's how you replicate. And that's how you replicate leadership. And if you're wanting to do that, I mean, that's none other than discipleship, if you ask me.
Absolutely.
And so, and you got a small group and you're leading a Bible study and you identify somebody that's got that capability as well. They take their own group and you've got yours. And then all of a sudden we've got guys splitting off, making their own Bible studies. And so leadership begets leadership.
Teaching is an investment.
Yeah.
So you may save yourself more time by doing it today, but you'll cost yourself so much more time if you don't teach someone else how to do it.
Yeah.
So I think John Maxwell kind of coined this. Number one, you do it.
Yeah.
Number two, you do it and bring someone else with you. Number three, have them do it while you're with them. Number four, have them do it. Number five, have them do it and teach someone else. That's how leaders create leaders. That's the leadership replication model. To go a little bit farther, Jesus says, I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. That's what he told Peter. Here's what that means. He gave someone else the keys. Authority to make decisions that would impact his bottom line on heaven and in earth.
Yeah.
So it's like, as powerful as he was, being fully God and fully man, he chose to partner with man to replicate, to scale his kingdom on earth.
Yeah, because I'm guessing he could have done it all himself and been just fine. And been just fine. No, I love those 3 C's. Competent. That's what I was writing down. Competent, character, and capacity. I love it. That's good stuff. And I will go one step further on scripture too. And for the listener, this is one of my favorites, but the 2 Timothy 2:2, where, Paul and Timothy are talking to each other. And I think that's actually when you came on, I was doing a series with that exact, the 2:22, but it says, take what I've, have taught you, teach it to faithful men so that they can teach others also. And so that's it right there.
We talk about that in FCA about handing off the baton and making sure that you don't lose speed. And me being a former track guy, if you look at the exchange zone, there's a couple of things that have to happen for an efficient exchange. You don't want to lose speed, so you have to make sure that you exchange in the proper zone so that you don't get disqualified. But you want to make sure that this person is up to speed and this person is still at full speed when they hand it off. Many leaders wait until they're slowing down to hand off the baton.
Well, and
hold on to it.
The guy getting the baton isn't standing still waiting for it. That's the other thing. That's moving. A great point. Yeah. That's awesome.
Jesus called those who are already working.
Yes. So, all right, let's land the plane here for the audience, because there's a ton of stuff here that they can.
I feel like we're just getting started.
Hopefully they were writing it down, right? But you know what? I don't want to reveal the entire, behind the curtain, because I want them to have to hire you and have you come in and change their organization.
I made a promise at the beginning of this show. I hope I kept it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. This was the reason that you were supposed to stay around, and he delivered.
Man, I didn't even get into the 5 P's of vision. That's my favorite part. We'll have to
5 P's of vision.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
Land the plane, and we can go into it later.
Hey, I'm not on any schedule, man. If you want to talk about vision, is important though. I mean, to be honest. So vision, people can say that they have a lot, that they're good at that, or casting the vision. You'll hear every leader say, that's my job, is to cast a vision, or that's part of my job. But where do people miss it? Let's start there, and then you can fold in those 5 P's. But tell me, where do people get where's the disconnect with leaders who say they're about vision, but maybe just struggle?
The disconnect is that vision is often blurred from our head to our hands. What I mean by that is we have this vision as a leader that we think is clear, and then we try to put it to paper, and our staff has no clue what we're talking about. It's cliche, it's jargon. To be the best, it's undefined. What does the best mean? Does that mean you have the most property in this market? You have the highest occupancy rate? So I'll do this quickly. Here's the 5 P's of vision.
Yeah.
Habakkuk chapter 2 says, the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain on tablets so that whoever reads it can run with it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time. If it tarries, wait for it. It will surely come. Here's the 5 P's. Number one, vision must be personal. Habakkuk says, the Lord answered me. It was a personal vision to what the nation of Judah was experiencing at that time. So that's number one. Is your vision personal, or is it so generic that any organization can plug and play and it makes sense for them? Vision must be personal. Number two,
good. That is good, bro.
Permanent. He says to write it on tablets of stone. When vision is written, when vision is discoverable, it can be shared with clarity throughout the organization. Also, writing it on tablets of stone signifies fruition for that idea to come to pass. Number three, it must be practical. Yeah.
Commitment.
Number three, it must be practical. He says to make it plain. So often we want to try and sound smart. We want to write a vision that demonstrates the intellect of the writer versus clarity in the mind of the reader. So it must be practical. How do we understand this? What can I do with it? Number four, it needs to be purposeful. He says, whoever reads it can run with it. A vision statement is a call to action. When I read it, it should prompt me towards progress. What do I do with this? Number five, it needs to be patient. Vision, he says, wait for it. It will surely come. This is the danger of being a visionary. I think T.D. Jakes said it this way. A visionary sees what shall be and wakes up to deal with what is. So vision must be blended well with perseverance and with patience. It's something that's futuristic. It's something that's coming. It's something that we must be faithful to today before it comes to pass tomorrow. That's the 5 P's of vision. I have a whole bunch more 3 Ds of designing core values.
No, that's so good,
purpose,
bro.
but yeah,
That's
I've
so
enjoyed
good.
this.
Dude, that's so good. I mean, that's one of my favorite too. The one in Habakkuk 2:2. I love that one. And because you put it out there and you write it down, you're committed, right? As long as you're not writing it in pencil with a big eraser and looking and staring at that eraser while you write it. Like, I think that shows commitment. It shows that you're taking ownership. Yeah. And so, and that, that obviously bleeds into the team, hopefully, and gets everybody to take ownership. Well, I mean, it's been awesome, dude. I knew it would be, but you went way beyond anything I expected in such a profound way. Like I didn't know that some of these layers that were a part of this, but man, you've clearly, it's totally a God thing. And you've totally committed to planning this out and putting it down. The
Spirit spoke to me simply to speak through me.
Yeah.
Whenever these revelations started to come and all of the pieces of my life came together and God gave me this Culture Catalyst program, it spoke to me first. I was literally mind blown, and I've been bubbling in my office for like the last 4 months and waiting to get this out to the world because scripture was so clear.
Yeah.
And you just see things, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. So you'll never read that again and not think of the 5 P's of vision.
That's right. That's right. So, okay, before we go, you made me think of one thing now. What is Alex Sezer working on this year? What are you expecting God to do in you that hasn't been done yet?
Man, so for me, this year is all about other people. I am looking to pour into other organizations, other people, to radically change the results that they experience. I'm doing that in 2 separate ways. Number one is corporately and organizationally with businesses, churches, helping them transform and define and build on culture. Helping them shape their ideas and put that into an easily understandable format to where they see it lived out daily in the organization. That's the first thing. The second thing that I'm doing is working in our school systems. So I'll actually be speaking at a school next week, and it's kind of similar topics, but just positioning myself kind of as a GPS, a goal positioning system for our students, helping them go from here to there in life. Here's where you currently are. There's where you want to be. So as a keynote speaker, just going into those schools, loving on our kids, inspiring our teachers. Even I'm doing some convocations also coming up in August. So just helping the teachers realize and understand the power and the purpose of being a teacher, that it's so much more than, writing out a lab or grading a paper, but they are literally shaping the leaders of tomorrow. I am a product of public school education and teachers that just chose to speak life into me, believe in me, push me. And my third grade teacher got the worst of me so that my fifth grade teachers and on could get the best of me.
That's good. That's good. Well, let's get Jesus back in the schools and we'll be back on track. But I'll tell you what, tell us where to find and are there resources yet, or did you give us kind of a sneak peek? Like, where can we go to find out more about what you said, other than having to listen to this over about 3 or 4 times before we can get it totally?
Yes. So we're live now. We just went live. So alexsezer.com, and that's AlexSezer.com. The most complicated way you can spell Caesar.
Shortest way. Yeah, shortest way. So that's good.
And then also you can find me. I'm back active on social media. I was off of social media for 3 years. So I'm back with the content. LinkedIn, Alex Sezer, Sezer, Instagram, Alex Sezer. And then also, YouTube, Alex Sezer, and then also just reactivated my Facebook. So you can find me there also. So I'm back in it, and looking forward to what God's going to do, because it's about him, not about me.
Well, and this is a servant leader podcast. So you tied a bow up nicely at the end when I asked what's God doing, and he's basically using you as a vessel to serve other people and empower them and to kind of advance the kingdom. And that's what we're about. So with that, he's been Alex Sezer. We've been Last in Line. Be blessed.